Hello folks, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is for all of the folks out there who are in bad apprenticeships or who are in apprenticeships and asking themselves if they're potentially in a bad apprenticeship. As someone who had two bad apprenticeships, I feel uniquely equipped to speak about bad apprenticeships and kind of maybe offer some advice and help folks get out of these situations. So to start, what would I consider a bad apprenticeship, right? Because I know there are some of you at home going, is my apprenticeship really that bad? And as a baseline, just to get things started, if you go home and cry about work or about your apprenticeship or about your situation with any form of regularity or often at all, or like more than once or twice, you're probably in a bad apprenticeship. Like if you're crying at work or home after work or on your way to work or about work like once a month, you're probably in a bad apprenticeship. If you already know that you are at a studio that uses low quality jewelry, that doesn't use safe practices, that doesn't have good cross-contamination, that doesn't use like clean sterilization or clean supplies, you're probably in a bad apprenticeship. If you just keep writing off your mentor as being just kind of old school or a little out of date, if your mentor tells you things sometimes and you go, ooh, okay, I'm gonna smile and nod at you right now, but I'm gonna tuck this little kernel of wisdom away and never use it because you know that it's wrong. If you have a mentor who tries to prevent you from having any communication with other studios or seeking out continuing education, whether that's attending conferences, taking online classes, subscribing to Patreons, or going to conventions, I'd say that's also a pretty big red flag. And if you just feel in your gut that something is off with your apprenticeship, that things just aren't right, that what you're being taught isn't right, or even if you feel like what you're being taught is right, but you are not being treated well or with respect, if you are being treated poorly, yelled at, like emotionally abused, you're probably in a bad apprenticeship. And the biggest one of all, if you're not being paid for your labor and your time, you are definitely in a bad apprenticeship. And if you're in America, you're in an illegal apprenticeship. And I'll link some videos here and down below where I've already talked about the legalities of unpaid apprenticeships and things like that. But when we're in these bad situations, what do we do? How do we handle it? Because, the first step is identifying and making that call that you're in a bad apprenticeship. And I know for a lot of people that can be the hardest. I definitely spent months trying to convince myself that my apprenticeship wasn't that bad, even though I was cold soaking jewelry and using externally threaded stuff at my first studio. I kept trying to be like, oh, well, we made our first order with Anatometal, so we have good quality jewelry on the way. And I'm researching autoclaves right now, so I know we'll be able to get one sometime. I was lying to myself. I was misleading myself. If we didn't already have quality jewelry and a proper autoclave, it wasn't a good apprenticeship. But I feel like even if you know you're in a bad apprenticeship, what can feel very overwhelming is what do I do now? What do I do next? Okay, this apprenticeship isn't going great, but where do I go from here? And I know for a lot of us, it's very tempting to stick it out and try and make it better, either because we feel like we'll never get the opportunity to get into this industry or do anything again, or because we do feel a lot of loyalty and love for the people we work with. Maybe we really like our mentor or our coworkers. Maybe this is the person who's been piercing or tattooing us since we were younger, and we care about this person. A lot of times we love our mentors and the people we work with. We don't want to just leave them, and we don't know what to do, or we're determined to make the situation better or have hope that it can get better. And I'm not going to say that no one has taken a bad apprenticeship or a bad foundation at a studio like that and turned it into something good, because people out there have. But what I will say is that is exceedingly, exceedingly rare. And usually what happens is apprentices stick it out in these bad situations, stick it out in these unsafe apprenticeships, and either never move on and graduate into being a full-time piercer or tattoo artist, or they eventually do, and then after a couple years they leave that studio anyway because they realize that they're being mistreated, that they're not doing safe services and good work, that things are never really gonna make meaningful and concrete change, and they've just kind of wasted a lot of years in a bad situation, picking up bad habits, doing bad piercings, doing bad tattoos, all for a workplace that most of us go home and cry about and stress about and know in our hearts we don't want to go into. I remember waking up with a sense of dread about going into work and seeing my mentor and dealing with how I would be talked to more often than I ever wanted to admit to myself. And nobody deserves to feel that way about any job or any education or training they're getting, but especially not just to be a tattoo artist or a body piercer. You should not feel so awful and so miserable and so distraught about the thought of going into work and doing something that you love. Because people who are drawn to this, who want to pierce, who want to tattoo, who want to be in the industry, we're here because we really genuinely love it. And so that makes it even more difficult when we're in these bad and unsafe situations. Listen, there's not a very high likelihood of the situation magically changing overnight or things magically getting better. And at the end of the day, you are spending a lot of time in a studio that usually does not really care about you that much and just looks at you as a way to make money or have cheap labor in the studio, or so that someone who frankly doesn't feel like piercing or tattooing or even working doesn't have to be there. And there is better out there. There are studios out there that are going to pay you a living wage while you're learning and training, that you're going to start off working with quality jewelry and quality supplies, where you're going to be respected and treated fairly, where if you make a mistake as an apprentice, which is normal because you're still learning, you won't be yelled at or screamed at or punished in some ridiculous way. You'll be talked to and treated like an adult with respect and like someone who's learning. But the first step is knowing that you have a bad apprenticeship. And the second step is getting out of it. Now, I know that can seem really difficult and really impossible. And for many, the ideal would be to go straight from a bad apprenticeship into a good one. And if you can navigate making that happen and reach out to better quality studios in your area, that is amazing. But for a lot of folks, that's not going to be a realistic step. So I'm here to say it's okay to take some time away from working in the industry. When I realized my first apprenticeship was not a good or safe apprenticeship, I quit kind of without a plan to get back into the industry. I just knew that I couldn't stay doing something unsafe. I couldn't stay hurting clients, and I couldn't stay being taken advantage of and disrespected every day and treated the way I was being treated. So I left, and I ended up taking a job working night shifts at Walmart, because on night shift, they don't care if you have bright yellow hair and a bunch of facial piercings, and night shift also paid more. So I was able to save up money towards relocating or having savings for a new apprenticeship, and I had a little bit of money left over to go to other good studios in the area, get pierced by them, network with them, and say, hey, I'm Lynn, I was in a crappy apprenticeship, I learned better and I left, and I'm still really serious and really passionate about this industry. And if you have any leads, even just on working front of house or working as counter staff or management, like please let me know, because I'm serious about this. I have friends who have left bad apprenticeships and gone on to get jobs with jewelry companies and work as sales reps for different jewelry brands. And as part of their job as sales reps, they've gotten to travel all over the country and meet all sorts of different studios and different piercers and network and connect that way and find new studios to work for. lots of folks who have left and come back in positions as front of house or as jewelers, or left and, like me, worked a different job, maybe as a barista or as a server or as a bartender, some line of work where they could still be visibly pierced and modified and make enough money to stash up a little bit and then start networking and making those connections and getting back into the industry in a good, safe way. And I know trying to take time away from piercing or tattooing can feel really scary or overwhelming, but for me, it was one of the best decisions I've ever done, because I realized very quickly that my studio was not only not a great apprenticeship, but I was being taught a lot of things wrong. Again, I wasn't working with quality jewelry, so I wasn't being taught about quality jewelry or how to work with it. And the skills that I learned working with externally threaded jewelry did not translate to working with internally threaded and threadless jewelry. And of course, if I was in a studio that wasn't using great jewelry and wasn't even using good sterilization, it certainly wasn't like I was being taught the best techniques for doing piercings. Sure, I was being taught passable techniques, and I was doing piercings that came out okay, but once I realized what else was out there, I realized that was the equivalence of learning how to use a typewriter when everyone else is on modern computers. And yes, I was still learning some skills that could translate, but I was immensely further behind all of my peers. I learned more and feel like I progressed more as an apprentice out of my first apprenticeship, just from following good piercers on Tumblr, taking the time to go and hang out at good studios, asking about shadowing opportunities. I asked certain piercers in my city if they would be down to go out for lunch or for coffee and talk about stuff. And I was pleasantly surprised that at least 3 or 4 of them said yes. And so I learned more over a cup of coffee with Eduardo Echeverria talking about his experience in the piercing industry than I did in like a month of working with my first mentor. So just because you're not actively working in the studio or working in the industry doesn't mean you aren't still making concrete progress towards doing that. And for me, I think what made it possible for me to leave was that I never left the apprentice mindset. Yes, I wasn't in a studio anymore, and yes, that was really hard. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't. But in my mind, I had no doubt that I was going to make it back into the industry and get back into another studio. I was still an apprentice, even without a studio. I was teaching myself photography skills, taking pictures of my own jewelry, and practicing how I would post about them on Instagram. I was networking with piercers online, and ultimately that landed me a good quality apprenticeship where I got to learn things the right way and made really important connections within the industry. And I didn't have to go into a workplace that made me want to cry every day to do it. And more importantly, I didn't have to do bad or unsafe piercings on clients and potentially hurt paying clients and damage their bodies just for the sake of my education. And that is, I think, the biggest thing that I hear from folks when I talk to people who are in bad apprenticeships and in not so great situations, is their response is always like, but this is my dream. I don't know if I'll get another shot. I don't know if I'll ever be able to afford to relocate for a good apprenticeship. Like, I just want to stick it out here and get started as a piercer, and then I'll try and get better elsewhere. And all of those are I statements. I want this. This is my dream. I really need this. And none of those statements consider the client and the person who's trusting you with their bodies and the person who's really putting their body and their skin on the line for you to be able to learn. I say it all the time that clients' bodies have to come before piercers' egos. So even if piercing is your dream, even if you want it, if your dream really is to be a good piercer, then you should already be putting the clients first. You should already be saying, man, I do really want to be a piercer, but not if it means hurting the people who are trusting me with their bodies. Not if it means knowingly doing bad or unsafe work. And what has stood out to me in the years since I left my first apprenticeship is how many really respected piercers and elders in this industry I have gotten the chance to meet and talk to who have all said, it was so good of you to leave those bad situations. And we so rarely see people make that difficult decision to put the client first and to not just stay in a crappy studio and prioritize themselves. And I really respect, Lynn, that you made that choice. And that says a lot about your character. And I remember being so scared the day I quit my first studio. I must have cried for like 4 or 5 hours that day, both before I went in and quit, knowing that that's what I was gonna do, and after I quit, feeling more lost and adrift than I ever had at that point. And I wish I could go back in time to little baby, like 19-year-old Lynn and say, you've just made the best decision you could make for your career. And this choice will get you so much further than another year or 2 years in this shop using crappy jewelry and out-of-date techniques. And it did. It opened so many doors for me. So many more piercers were willing to take me seriously, talk to me, give me their time, give me their advice, because they respected that I'd made that difficult decision. And if you are finding yourself in a bad apprenticeship, if you're finding yourself in a situation like I was, there is absolutely hope. I started where you were, and look at where I am now. An APP member in a great studio, traveling internationally and getting to pierce and do guest spots and educate and really make a successful career out of doing this. And truly, I wouldn't have made it this far if I didn't make that impossibly difficult decision to leave my first bad apprenticeship. So if you're in a situation like this or you're struggling, please know you're not alone. Please know so many of us have gone through this. And also know that I understand the decision to leave is a hard one, but it's also probably going to be one of the best ones that you can make. My inbox is always open for everyone, but it is no secret that I have a soft spot for apprentices and folks trying to get into this industry. So if you're in a situation like this and you want some personal advice or you just want to talk to someone about it, shoot me a message, send me an email. I'm not the fastest to respond because I do get a lot of messages, but I will always take the time to respond. And if you're local in the area of Seattle or the Pacific Northwest, I've been hosting some piercer meetups here, and we would love to see more folks out, and it's a great opportunity to network and meet other folks. And also, hit me up. See if we want to get coffee sometime. Talk about what your goals are for getting into the industry. Get some one-on-one advice. And it's not just me. There's a lot of great piercers here in this area and all across the country who are more willing than you might expect to offer some advice and guidance to folks who are trying to do this the right way. And sincerely, from the bottom of my heart, you do not deserve to be in an unsafe or scary or bad apprenticeship situation. Nobody does. You deserve respect, you deserve a living wage, and you deserve a job that you don't dread going to every day. And your clients deserve safe, educated, and informed services with good quality jewelry and safe sterilization practices. I hope this helps. All right, folks, thanks for sitting down and hanging out. I can't wait to sit down and chat again soon. And if anyone wants to see me do anything more specific about my experience leaving from an apprenticeship and finding a good one, or even just more about my top suggestions for what to do in the interim or what to prepare for an apprenticeship, let me know in the comments down below. I'm also going to link some of my blog posts that I've written on this subject and just some good resources for folks in general in the caption of this video. And again, my inbox is open. I'm here. You don't have to go through some of these scary situations alone, okay? All right, have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.